All right, g'day guys. Thank you for joining in to our next coach chat, MU Coach Chat. Justin Schueller here, Dean Vickerman online as well. Tonight we thought we'd try and tackle probably a topic that I reckon I've spoken about more than any other in my time in development, and that's when or coach to develop and how can you achieve both. Dino, over to you. Got all the answers, don't you?
Not all the answers. I guess for me, firstly, I hope everybody got a chance to see The Last Stand last night. Fantastic for me to go back and see Jordan again. As a kid that grew up with Jordan posters all over his wall, and I was kind of looking back, and when he was in college, I think I was 11 years old, and that impressionable under 12 kind of age group where he made me love the game. So I'm hoping that there's an opportunity for kids to go back and have a look at it, see it, and absolutely fall in love with the game again during this period, because we don't have too much other hoop online. So it's a good opportunity to go and do that. But I thought even about it today, and I was thinking back, it was like, what was his journey as a young kid when he was growing up, and seeing the battles and the conversations about him and his brothers in the backyard. And it made me think about, who's got brothers, who's got a neighbor that jumps the fence during this period, and, who are the kids that are going to come out of this just better players because they had someone better to play against. And, I thought that was a really interesting growth of him, and the way that he constantly got challenged and beat up and kept coming back for more, and just had that absolute desire to win. I thought that was really interesting.
Spot there, Dino, to thank our sponsors that we couldn't be doing these things and still ticking along without them. So Dreamstreet Lending, Tyre Power, SodaStream, Buller, Trojan Tools, Roll, the TAC, Subaru, Harcourts, Moose Toys, Chemist Warehouse, Wiz, the Sporting Globe, Domatech. We thank them immensely and appreciate again you guys joining in. Where I wanted to try and hit right off the bat here before we do get into the nitty gritty of it is that we understand the landscape that is Victorian junior hoops, and our model is built on got to win straight away, get your grading done, get your seeding, and then get into your season. So I know the conversations that I've had since moving over to Victoria have always stemmed around that. How can you have a development mindset and still be able to get your results and go from there? So where we'll try and take you with it is into some different thoughts, and hopefully we can answer some different ways that we feel you can achieve both. Dino, your thoughts on the role of a coach and what it's like as a rep coach and a domestic coach, and how we need to be able to take care of those things?
Yeah, I think for me that, the first one is you're playing rep basketball. So there's an expectation that you try and win as many games as you possibly can. Domestic basketball is a little bit the opposite. You give everybody a pretty equal opportunity to develop, and you restrict some of the good players at different times to enforce some development. But once you get to rep level, it's a priority that everybody on that team has made the team for a reason. They can do something well. And I think, your job as a coach is to make sure that you allow the best thing that they do to be able to shine. And you keep reinforcing the points to say, this is how you help us. This is how you might be getting one stop. It might be a rebounder. It might be you dive on the floor. It might be just, a simple skill that you've got to identify that person does really well. I remember being up in Brisbane for our game up there recently, and the Bullets' new facility, they share it with a netball team, and on the wall it basically had that. Each player had what the couple of things that they did great for the team, and then it had their couple of work-ons right next to it, and that was kind of their daily look at to say, I'm a reminder about what I do well, and here are the things that I've got to keep improving on. I thought, that was great to just see in the locker room, and it's got to be the mindset of a coach the whole time about, because we often just look at the things that they can't do, and what stops him from playing because he can't do this, rather than having that other mindset about what can he do for my team? How can he really impact it to help? And then what can I make him better at?
That's an outstanding point then. I think that is something that's easy. We can see the warts pretty quickly, but to find the good in people's often a challenge. To me, for us, like as coaches, that's our number one job, is to make every single athlete better. And I've always had a thought that every athlete can be coached. We just got to figure out the way to do that. And so for me, the first area we wanted to start with here was the development building blocks. What does that actually look like for your teams? And all of us out there are going to have different stages and different groups we're working with. But as a coach, what is my role with this group? What stage of the season are we at? How much can we ledger the season into? This is an individual skill phase. Now we're building into concept phase. Now we're building into result or competition, etc. The other part is, well, what is your responsibility within your club? Most of us at rep level do have a responsibility to pass our athletes on better than when we got them. So what does that look like, and how can we build our weekly training environments to be able to continue that foundation forward? One of the things for me that in every level, the fundamentals are the same regardless of what age group, what level, what gender, it doesn't matter. The fundamentals are going to be strong, and the order for me is shoot, pass, dribble. And it's really indicative for me that that's the order that it needs to go. Shooting's the master skill. So all of our athletes, there has to be a development piece to that. If I teach my athletes how to make a contested layup, I guarantee you the results end up being better than if we aren't good at contested layups, or being able to make our free throws, or being able to consistently hit uncontested shots. So within the skill-based element of it, then the result will come and take care of itself. Dino, thoughts on how our fundamentals actually take care of the overall winning component?
Yeah, and I'm probably, when I think about it, I still think dribbling is to me is the skill that I want to teach the first. I want everybody to have the ability to go wherever they can on the floor, and it's hard to shoot if you haven't got to a position or pass to someone to get you in that right spot. So yeah, I absolutely agree. Shooting is an absolute master skill, but dribbling and passing, they have to sit right next to it. And I know the first drills that I teach in practice for under 12s is always going to be dribbling and passing before I teach shooting. So I don't disagree with you there, but everybody having the ability to make a bucket is really important.
No, I love it. And that's the beauty of coaching. We've all got our sort of soul beliefs. It does lead me into a bit of a chat and a story on how skill-based development can really impact your results overall. And my time down in Tasmania at the Institute of Sport there, I viewed us like Slovenia. Slovenia at that time had won a medal at a world championship, population of 2 million, beating some of the highest population nations in the world. I remember having this chat with Ian Stacker about, well, how can we get Tassie competitive? And what I came down to the thought of is, if we could be the best three-point shooting team at a national championship and the best free throw shooting team at a national championship, that would actually give us a chance to be able to compete and put us in a position where we could win. Then everything else came along with it. And I guess that's where the shooting element for me became pretty prevalent. And we had some success in that time. We were able to win some medals, get a number of top 4 finishes in that time, and have some athletes go and progress. And again, at no point in that program was it about we're going, this is all about the winning component. It was really about, can we now have a fundamental skill base that is going to help us succeed throughout. And that's just an example of that. Also in that same sort of period, we went away to a world championship with an under-17 team. We won a silver medal on being the best three-point shooting team, the second best free throw shooting percentage team in the world. So again, that's part of those skills that, that Mark Watkins was the head coach. We drummed shooting in every single practice. 50% of it was in one way or another built around it. And again, those fundamental skills, and we definitely could pass, Dino. We could definitely dribble as well in all those programs, but just being able to really hone on something, build a system around it that encourages the athletes to then be able to use their talents, like Dino spoke about at the start. Who are our best people that can do these skills? Who are my best penetrators to be able to get them open? Who are our best rebounders to be able to find second chance points and draw fouls inside? All those components from those the fundamentals that are developed over time definitely can come into play and fruition to results. Have I changed your mind, Dino?
No, no. It was probably interesting to go to a question here. Dean, you teach ball handling first, Justin shooting. Where does defensive rank amongst these? And
Great question.
Probably a really, really good question. And again, you know, there's going to be your different philosophy on what is most important. Is it about stopping them or is it scoring? You know, and we all have different philosophies on how to win basketball games. But I think, you know, when you teach, like any skill, you teach dribbling, you show them, and then they trial it. Then you know, in 1-on-0, and then you put some chaos to it, whether that be you as a coach and they're making a dribble past you, and then you add the next element of playing 1-on-1 and start to, you know, then put your defensive philosophy about how to guard the basketball. And so to me, I've always built that part in about how you defend the ball, you know, along with how you teach dribbling skills. And then, because again, one counters the other. If you're going to make a reaction there, what's your reaction defensively? If you're going to make a defensive reaction there, what's your offensive reactions? And then you start to build both of those. So, yep, they go hand in hand for me.
Yeah, no, I'm very similar down to, I like to teach it as a game of opposites. So where we're trying to be great in one area of the skill phase, well, this is how we can counter that. And that's what we've got to try and take away, and how we can be disruptive with something. So I do think it goes hand in hand, and teaching it in a two-way fashion definitely allows us to progress the athletes in shorter periods of time, teaching two ways as opposed to just one thing at a time. That next question there, Dino, how do you develop an effective development plan from both team and individual athletes? Talking here from a domestic level, where a coach will get a new set of athletes almost every season and really only have 1 hour a week to practice. Do you want to talk about kind of what I guess we do in that sense as well a little bit in how we plan for the team and individuals?
Yeah, and I think firstly going back to, you know, being a coaching director, you know, where I did that at Geelong and Mornington for a little period as well. And, you know, just having that set criteria about, you know, what you wanted to introduce, what you wanted to and develop at each level before you kind of moved on was really important for me. And you know, I remember just kind of picking that up and going and talking to coaches and say, you know, have you got to this skill at this point in the season? And, you know, I think, you know, same as this coronavirus thing for me, it's like I found my routine. I've gone a couple of weeks, and now I need something new. It's us as coaches to keep finding the absolute, you know, what's next, what's the next skill. So again, going back to that question, make a real assessment of where everybody's at. Have the criteria that's pretty much set out by all associations to say at this level they should be able to do this, and then if they're not, go down a level to, you know, where they find out where they are, and then look at your advancements and find out, you know, or put your points through the season about when you're going to introduce something new, or have they reached that level and they're ready to learn something new as well. You know, it's no use just moving on if they haven't got the fundamental right.
I think any individual plan has to work hand in glove with what your style of play or whatever direction the club is going with that as well. So peeling it back and getting the layers on that and working out, well, what do your guards need? What's the skill base on the individual sense there that helps the system work in the direction that we want, both offensively and defensively? What's that look like for our wings? What's that look like for our bigs? And develop the plans from there. Next one here, Dino, teaching under 12s. Some haven't played before. You said dribbling and passing is crucial. Any other tips? Over to you.
I was a massive cone person with under 12s. Would really have, the kind of the 4 dribbles that you wanted to work on, crossovers, onside, behind the backs, and spin dribbles were kind of the 4 before you put into, hesitations and kind of retreat dribbles to get out of trouble. And so I spent a whole bunch of time with my under 12s, and again, it was one of my favourite teams I've ever coached, the Geelong under 12s, and we went to the National Classic and got to play against Ken Watson, and really, really fun time coaching under 12s. But again, we did a lot of cone work. Then we took away the cones and used players and coaches to defend it. Obviously, then you put in your shooting workouts that, now you start a lot of your dribbling from halfway, that now you got, layup finishes and whatever finishes you want to work on as well. So trying to combine a bunch of those things. But we did a lot of our passing was just playing netball, just totally taking away the dribble. And so, a lot of 40 pass in the half court kind of drills to really, once you taught the basics and fundamentals of the 3 or 4 passes that you want to teach, to get it into that competitive situation that you have to work on creating leads. You have to work on faking a pass to make a pass, and then finding the appropriate pass to get it to different people, was the kind of dribbling and passing drills that I really worked on from the 12s.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think as the athlete progresses, it's always about, well, how can you make that another challenge without it being too far deep into the water? And so advantage, disadvantage, some 2-on-1 type stuff where they're making read and react decisions, and then figuring out, well, where is hand positioning? One that we still use in warm-ups is Piggy in the middle. Even with our NBL guys, we're just working on seeing where hands are, what's the timing, and how can I shift the D a little bit to be able to create an advantage from an offensive passing point of view. I think that works at any age group.
Yeah, and obviously boxing and soccer, are two of the other that we just to try and work on footwork and stance. And again, if you got to listen to the Phil Handy session last week, he referred to soccer a lot in his ability to make stance, and then he talked about stance both offensively and defensively being very, very similar, and your ability to continue to talk about stance on both sides.
One of the biggest learnings for me, Deno, is when you brought that up this year and broke it down to the guys about why you believed in it, and it just clicked for me straight away is how important the transfer of that footwork is. And then Archie Thompson comes out and changes the whole world on that one, but it's all good. Next question here. A little bit sort of off the side of it, but when coaching a player who's developed bad habits, what are our beliefs on, do we break them right back down, or do we keep progressing with where they're at? Your thoughts on that one, Dino?
Yeah, I think, bad habits in skill, to me, have to be, broken down. And again, it's depending on what age group you've got. There's still at times having players that you've seen be really successful shooters that don't have perfect form and tool right at the end of their shot. And I think that's, important to say, is the actual total end result where he finishes his shot still okay? Or at an elite level, does he still finish right with something funky in the middle of it? So, I think definitely for shooting is the skill that you can create probably the most bad habits in. When you think of dribbling bad habits, you think of, carrying the basketball, having it too far away from your body. Definitely work on those. But yep, if you've got a mechanical fault in his shot, that's certainly the outcomes are him missing a lot. You have to go ahead and break it down and really get back to form shooting and staying within your range. And I've been doing some shooting with my girls just over the road. And one of the fun things that we used to do back with Brett Brown at the Melbourne Tigers before practice was just a game of 10 up. And so Brett Brown would lead us, and we all just had to follow him in the shots and the first person to get 10. Doing it with my daughters the other day, what I thought was really good was say they want to win the drill, so they're going to actually shoot the shots that they're going to make a high percentage of. And then I try to do something off the bounce just to try and help develop them. But again, I think that's really important, that people feel comfortable about the shot that they want to shoot, and that was a fun way just to kind of build it.
Yeah, beautiful. I think a couple parts to it. One, down in Tassie, working with an exercise physiologist, they sort of really got me to think about body mechanics. And some athletes aren't going to have the same technique, but what Dino said there, that finish, the follow through, is kind of where they helped me get to, is the absolute thing that has to be on point every single time. And the other thing that sticks in my head is the argument we're going here with development versus result. I think there is a point at an athlete's development, this is age-wise, where if they're a hitter, it is dangerous to change the way they get to that follow-through point, versus if they're young enough and we can really take their percentages to another level by going back and breaking it down. I think that's a thought process that we sometimes need to be careful with and definitely think about.
And I think that release point becomes a big one for the juniors. I remember myself and seeing my daughters right now about, kind of shooting under 12s and kind of shooting that pocket, and then it comes up your release point somewhere near your eye, and just keep assessing, how high that release point is able to get. And, you look at some of the smaller guards in our league, like a Bryce Cotton or a Shane Hill back in the day, who have the ability to get their shot off because of their high release point, and even Brett Maher pulling it back behind their head a little bit to go ahead and change their release point to be able to continue to get their shot off.
The other point I want to make is, don't be afraid to just have a look at what your athletes are doing. I think when I went through as a junior, some of the shot attempts and different finishes around the basket that are pretty much standard right now, we would have been told to do laps on when I was a kid. So being able to see, well, how is an athlete getting their shot off? Why are they getting it off that way? And having conversations on that front sometimes can become a pretty good strength for a certain athlete. I know Chelsea D'Angelo, when I was coaching her underhand scoop was one of the most elite things I kept seeing her do off the glass. And one of her coaches hated it, but kept trying to encourage them that, well, she's mastered this for whatever reason. We can keep encouraging that. So I think sometimes you see what your athletes are doing naturally, and sometimes we can go with it. Dino, play to win versus development in rep basketball and individual court time. Always controversial to put here. Thoughts on court time in general, and whether that changes based on the level you play?
Yeah, I think it does. Obviously the higher the level you get, and same with our season, you get to finals time, the rotation can get a little bit shorter. Obviously against the Kings, for us, with the foul trouble that we had, it didn't. It certainly needed absolutely everybody. So I guess that's why, throughout the season, you've got to make sure that everybody has been challenged to a point that that they can still operate in a final if something like that happened. But the old adage of have a squad of 12, play 9, trust 8, is holds pretty true for me. When you get a big game, there's going to be an 8-man rotation that you're then going to find a way to use 9 and 10 for certain little situations, again, for their skill level to what helps you. Is it one defensive possession? Is he a great shooter? What's that skill that he possesses that you can still try and get him in the game?
Yeah, I think in clubland, when I've been a coaching director, I've really recommended our highest level teams only have 9 athletes on any given week, because I think once you get to 10, it's really challenging to share that time around. But that said, for me, my direction's always been the first 3 quarters, you're trying to rotate that thing evenly, and we're trying to find ways to have every athlete be able to, 1, develop, but 2, be able to pass on what they're good at. And then in the last quarter, it's money time. So at that point, whoever's been sticking to team rules, been accountable, who's shown some some progression through the game, then absolutely they deserve more of the pie at that point. But I think that same mindset can come relevant to what phase of the year that you're in as well. So if grading's occurred and now you're into just regular weeks, well then you can talk to your athletes about, well, now we're going to really, this is a period where everyone's playing and we're just going to try and get better. Then it may get into a classic or a finals period, and you're having those conversations again about, well, if you're doing the work, if you've made your progression, then you'll get more of the pie. Where are we at here? Best training resources and tools to help training kids with disabilities, example, autism. Do you want me to dive in on this one, Dino? I've had a few.
No idea.
One of the challenges that we've had in the past is finding ways to, at an entry point, and I'm talking under 12s, under 14s, is how any athlete, whether there's a restriction there or not, what's the best way for them to learn. And I think it's just a good practice to try and hit everything initially when you're working with a group, and then to just have those individual conversations as you go through it. Because I think sometimes we can make a presumption that an athlete's understanding it, but until they physically walk through a drill or whatnot, they may really struggle to grasp the concept. So anything that you can learn on the fly at that entry point, I think really does encourage how far and how much you can help an athlete later on. Any other thoughts there, Dana?
No, you got that one.
Too easy. How do you handle higher level players that are getting bored with basic drills that the lower level players need to keep working on? That's even relevant for us a bit at an NBL level, isn't it, Dana?
Yeah, I think so. And I had two things come to my mind straight away. One, let them do some teaching so they can help their teammates improve the way that they do that fundamental by them taking some teaching responsibilities to that. But I think anytime you're doing a basic skill, and just the progression that Phil Handy talked about last week, there's no problem within the drill of doing something that might be basic to that player, that you can add a different element, whether that be you jumping in front of him and making it a contested, or having it one extra dribble, or putting a spin to the finish of it, or you can add an element that challenges that player as well.
Yeah, and I think everyone wants to compete. So is there a degree that you can put time and score to something, or just manipulate that same drill that you believe in makes the athletes better, but how can you also get it to be a little bit more of a challenge in the way that you want it to go? At NBL level, how much do you have for fundamentals versus team concepts during training? Dana, you want to hit that one?
Yeah, you take it, because I think you
right.
get a good feel on that one.
Yeah, beautiful. So I think one of the greatest things that we do is the start of practice, we're hitting something that is specific for us for being good that week against whoever we're playing. So it starts from our warm-ups. I think those that have tuned in before, Dino's spoken about pop and hitting some defensive concepts, or we spoke about we needed to be better at our sprints. So hitting some individual development even in the warm-up component. But then we'll go into small-sided games or breakdowns pretty much almost every session until maybe right before game day shoot around or the day before a game, and just making sure we're hitting areas on that. The other part, and the luxury we have though, is we get our athletes in the building pretty early and hit them with daily vitamins. So our individual development and our individual plans that are set out for the guys are really taken care of in that pre-practice or post-practice period. But as far as a collective on the floor, I think we do a pretty good job of finding an avenue to just hit something that's going to make us better for that week. Do I cover that, Dana?
Yeah, no, you got it. It's good.
A bit of track coaching rep, met 2 under 18 girls. Any advice in maintaining their motivation throughout the BJBL season?
Yeah, I think for any athlete, having that, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit later, is obviously that growth mindset.
Yeah.
If they feel like they're improving and getting better, and they're having an impact on the team, improving and getting better, that the motivation will stick. To me, there's got to be those little checkpoints, whether that be after every game or at the next practice, to say, you know, these were the two or three things that you do great. The things that we wanted you to work on, how are you going with those? How do we help you get better? And again, just like we do in every practice, how did you make someone else better? I think if they not only just think about their own improvement, which helps with their motivation, but if they feel like they're contributing to someone else on the team to make them better, I think that helps with their motivation as well.
Yeah, for sure. A couple more here, and then we'll jump into kind of where we were going with it, Dino. How did you find the balance of developing someone like Chris Goulding over ability versus his role in the team and the specific needs of the team?
Yeah, I think when I got Chris 3 years ago, you know, I think it probably only a year or two before he'd come off a 50-point game. So, you know, the offensive talents, you know, were always there. And I think we challenged him defensively, you know, during that period of time. And that's where, you know, major our focus went to. His ability to get himself open and use screens is world elite, and we saw it versus NBA teams. We've seen it, you know, throughout. So him getting his body right, him committing to the defensive tasks, and us holding him accountable to those things. Then we gave him pretty much a green light to shoot balls, and we'd certainly challenge him at different times on did he force one or not. But we never really locked in heavy on his shot selection, because if he was doing those things defensively and still shooting it at a good clip, every now and again we had to certainly let him have a couple more fly.
Fair enough too. Next one here, just our approach to vitamins or individual plans with a new athlete coming in. So maybe Jack Purchase as an example versus a veteran like David Barlow. What's our approach? What's our main focus, etc. Do you want me to fire away on that one, Dino?
Yeah, I think your testing to start with and finding people's level is fantastic.
Yeah, so there's been a volume shooting, I guess, pro forma that I started about 8 years ago, just so I could basically compare athletes and also give them a regular testing point that they could just get done and also be able to gauge themselves on where they're going with it. And then from that would always come into the individual skill development piece where, yep, no, this is what we need to work on. It might have been foot speed into their shot and the transformation into what their result was from there. And that's something that I guess whenever, probably more the off-season period, but whenever athletes are coming in, we're hitting them with that pretty regularly. And then through the season, we'd hit them with that once a week, just to be able to so they know where their maintenance is and whatnot. And I'm happy to share that with anyone. I use that with my Crocs team as well. Kylie from the office, if you're interested, we can get that out. But I guess the other part is, so someone like David Barlow, so Jack Purchase will dictate a little bit more to him about this is where he needs to go. And the foot speed's one for Jack that we were constantly working on. He's an elite shooter, but that speed of footwork into his shot to be able to get it off at an NBL level is something that we made a focus point. David Barlow, on the other hand, so he'll do his vitamins post-practice, and Dave's just got his routine set. And so we had a conversation point. He made clear to me what he was really comfortable with and how he felt he was going to get the best out of it. So then we made sure we had after every practice straight away, and he'd make 5 threes in a row from 7 spots, and then 10 free throws in a row religiously. And he wouldn't leave the gym until he did it. Mind you, it didn't take him long to get it done every day, but that was his routine as well. So that's probably the difference in approach of someone coming in. We try and massage and guide them to the veteran who really knows where they're at, trying to get them to have some ownership as well on where they're going with it. Good with that one, Dino?
Good.
Let's we'll pause on the questions just quickly, because I think some of them are definitely going to get answered with the growth mindset. Do you want to kind of, you've mentioned it, Dino, there. Do you want to hit your thoughts in and around kind of, I guess, how we progress and the process versus result on how we develop.
Yeah, I'll hit this one question. You go ahead and start that off. I thought this one was interesting. What are the critical success factors for a junior to progress to elite programs that draws your attention to them? I watched a good thing on Danny Ainge's son at Boston, who's kind of taken over director of player personnel, talking about the draft. And I thought that was the thing that first catches your eye. You look at body type. When I walked into a game, it's like, you know, in juniors, who's going to have a body type that can allow them to, you know, progress through senior ranks. Then you're going to look at how hard they play. You know, are they really into the game, and every possession is important to them. You know, they're self-motivated kind of guys. They don't need being pushed from the coach. Then you're going to see their attitude, how they respond to different situations. And then you're going to obviously continue to see the skill element of their game. But yeah, I thought it was an interesting one, just talking about the draft and certainly how they've got a draft this year without having workouts and seeing things on tape and really assessing people's attitude over the phone.
Well, that for me, it's you have to develop your own shopping list and what you're looking for, I think. But for me, in my time, it's been 5 key things we've evaluated athletes on, and that's basically competitiveness is one. Dino hit that. Like how much do they want to compete? How are they with their teammates? Do they compete in the right way, wrong way? And that can be your own gauge on that. Everyone's got their own different tolerant levels on certain things, but how you feel with that. Shooting ability, master skill, got to be able to demonstrate certain level of competency with that. 1v1 offensive ability. So that for me was their ability to be able to create for themselves off the bounce or create for others, depending what their roles were in the group. And what Dino touched on as well, their ability to separate and get open. If they're a shooter, was that something that they had? 1v1 defensive ability. So same, flip it. Can they stay in front of their man or the position below or above because of the versatility and where the game's going? And the last one was basketball IQ. And that one for me was the same at every single level. And that was as simple as if they saw 2 defenders come to them, were they trying to play over the top of them or were they trying to find the open man? And if they tick that part, then we'd look at other elements in their basketball IQ, how they used the ball screen, what were they like in the first 8-second phase of offense, first 8-second phase of defense, etc. So that's kind of something that we've built over time. So, sorry, just catching up on the question. The issue we had introducing new plays and drills to develop athletes, they would struggle to win, Dino. What's our thoughts around that?
I've read a really, Chris Anstey's been writing some good articles recently about different players he played against and different opportunities, and wrote a really good article about his move from the Tigers to the Magic to go over to Georgian. And I think in the first meeting with Brian, he told him that he was going to go backwards, you know, before he went forwards, because he'd never lifted weights like this, and it was going to affect his shot. And but by the end of the year, you know, he'd be thanking me for the hard work that they put in the gym, and how he was able to go ahead and progress his skills. And I think that's, you know, for anyone, whenever you put in a new skill, whenever you put in a new defense, you know, you're going to go backwards for a little bit. And certainly how well you test it in practice is going to get a better response in games. You know, we have thrown some defenses out this year. We had a 1-3-1 kind of thing. That was
1-1-3.
Yeah, it was a little bit different, and you know, it helped us win a couple of games. But we practiced it to a point where it was a little bit confusing for us in practice offensively, and we found that in games that we got down by a margin in a couple of games, and we threw that one out there. So I think you can have those quick hits, but wasn't sustainable for the whole year, and we weren't willing to practice with it the whole year either. There wasn't the perfect trust that it was going to get us to a point that we really wanted to, but it was a stopgap. I think, the drills that, like I said before, you're going to have your routine. You're going to add something, every second week or every month. You're going to add something to make sure that your progression is there. Again, you'll have an assessment about when you use that in games. Maybe you're up by 20 or you're down by 20 to say, I might just introduce it here. We'll see what it looks like. Next week, we'll give it 5 minutes. Next week, we'll give it a little bit more, and you progress that new skill or new system of play into what you're doing.
Yeah, another one with drills, just as you're talking there, Dino, I think be great at keeping notes and keeping your practice plans, because something I've tried to do is just go back through this period and look at old practice plans and stuff. And there's so many drills that I've just forgotten about that I used to love and kind of fell out of love along the way. And definitely, if and when I get back in front of my team, there's some stuff that I want to bring back and just see what tweaks we can take. So I think, just a little tip out there, just keep looking back, because I think, there's always something good that you've done in the past as well. Question here on Zoom training sessions with 12 rep boys, working on detailed skills where there's not the ability to physically assist them with errors. We touched on this in a session a couple back, that you can, with the Zoom, like the advantage is you can constantly coach without having to physically be there, and just setting some key goals. And we spoke about can't remember the name of that app now. It's Home Court app, where the guys are challenging each other with it and whatnot. Just having something where you're able to set a target, have a measure, a finite piece of the skill, but then be able to still physically see it and be able to give real-time feedback, I think is one of the great advantages in this time with this pandemic going on, than what wouldn't have been able to happen if it was in another era. So being able to just still use that. The other one was Coach My Vid, having the athlete video it, send it to you, so that you can still provide some detailed feedback there. We'll move into some other thoughts that we had in and around this, and then wrap up for you guys. But the process versus result mindset of basically any program, and something that I learned really early on was I was 100% result driven. I just wanted to win, because I thought that's how I was going to be able to get progression and move forward with my own coaching ability. And I really came to a realization pretty quick that if we didn't skip any steps and we believed in the way that we went about things, and the little catchphrase I gave myself was keep trying to provide an environment where success is inevitable. And then I had to break down, well, what does success look like in a practice environment? And that to me was the non-negotiables that I had around, punctuality, how we went about practicing. So the how was we were always going to keep score, because we wanted our athletes to be competitive and find a way to progress on that. Little details in and around there, but the constant was we're always going to take steps forward. So whether we introduced something new, it didn't matter if it wasn't perfect straight away, but we were going to keep persisting with things until we got to a point where we were pretty comfortable, and then we would challenge again. And through that whole time, the other thing that I kind of got to, and was in a little bit of a question earlier, was I had a variance of athletes that I was working with. I kept feeling that I was hitting the middle ground. And it wasn't until I went, no, we're just going to keep throwing athletes in the deep end, and we're going to get them to get up to that level as quick as we can. And that to me is where the environment actually became one where it just kept progressing, because we were hitting the highest point, catering for the best athlete we had, but then everyone else was able to get up to that level, and we were able to challenge again. We just try to generate our own growth mindset with that. Dino, your thoughts in and around how you can provide an environment where it's constant growth?
Yeah, to me that growth mindset is, there's never a quit. And whenever, there's something that we face this year with our team, to say, is at a point of the season, has anyone quit, or are we still trying to find a way? And I think that's the attitude that you've got to stamp out in your group. If they ever feel like they can't get there, or they ever feel like they want to quit something, and rather than have, how can we get better? We lost that game. What are we going to learn from that game? How are we going to go into practice next week and work on the learning from that one, and then move on to the next game? And I think, certainly what we try and do, we have our first practice back, and we talk about it as coaches, second practice back. It might be a scouting day, but we may pick something from the last game as well to say, hey, we absolutely need to work on that, because that's why we lost the basketball game. We need to get better at that and improve on that over the next month, and make sure that we hit that drill enough to make sure that we improve and we don't lose to that team again because of that one thing.
And I think I've hit this before. One of the great things I've learned from Dino and working with him is that we are consistent. Every win, lose, or draw, it's the same process every single time to just keep getting better. And I think when there's that consistency and the athletes aren't getting through too many highs and lows through a season, that's when progression can occur pretty consistently. And again, hopefully the results end up taking care of themselves. Dino, I'm throwing this one to you. What does a great coach look like and feel like to you?
He's grey, he's bald. No, there's a great coach. I think when you see a great coach, it's one that probably got to a point that he doesn't need to say a lot. And possibly, our job is to, in some ways make ourselves redundant. If we've coached well enough that the players know what to do and don't need us. And I think one moment in the game that I was so proud was a game semi-final for United against New Zealand in our championship year, where I was about to call timeout, and Ty Wesley and Peter Hooley just waved me off and say, "Coach, we got it." And they ran a perfect play. We scored the bucket. Josh Boone scores that bucket, and we win the game. And I was like, wow, it's one of the proudest moments for me as a coach to say they just knew what to do, and we've done a good job as a club, passing on information that we didn't need a timeout, and they executed something perfect. So I think when you have those kind of moments where you see teams just organise themselves, you see leaders like a Damien Martin take control of their team, and they've been empowered to go ahead and do that. But certainly, there's a lot of other reasons that you'll say a coach is a great coach, and obviously winning percentages is going to be something to do, but being consistent and challenging, to be at the top all the time is a very tough thing to do. And so you have utmost respect for, the Brian Gorgians, the Trevor Gleasons of our league, most recently Andre Lamanis, that were able to stay at the top for a really long time, and that doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah, for me, it's accountability. They say they're going to do something, they act on it, and they do that. Honesty, that there's no grey area. It's black and white, and it's clear cut on what roles are and how they interact with every single athlete on the group. And then the last part is be inspired. I don't know how many watched the doco last night, but when Roy Williams was talking last night, like, he just got me going, just being able to have that interaction with athletes where there is a little bit of inspiration about it, I think is pretty important too. Couple last questions here just to wrap it up. Tactical additions, do you use something new in the following game right after you've introduced it, or do we allow some trial and error prior to drip feeding it in? Thoughts on that, Dino? I got it. Well, I guess the zone's a great example, and the way that we go about our preparation is try and find advantages or points of difference for us during the week. And that was something that we definitely spent a couple of days on before we threw it in. And so for us, I think it is more about us actually getting to a comfort point in a practice environment prior to using it. Is that fair to say, Dino?
Yeah, I think there's, that where it's a scheme system versus a new out of bounds play. I've been known to throw an out of bounds play into a shoot around and throw it into a game where you haven't practiced it with defenders, and so you're really not sure what some of the counter moves could be if they take away that first hit. But again, using that as a surprise element in the game that a team hasn't scouted you, hopefully you get the look that you're after. So yeah, more than willing to throw something different out there in a game as well.
I think one additional point to that is introducing something new. Sometimes it's good not to give all the answers, to just throw it out there pretty loosely and then just see what the athletes come up in trying to defeat whatever scheme you've got if it's a defensive one, so that gives you some lessons and learnings as well, versus A plus B equals C, and then, yep, that's great, but then something happens in the game and you haven't even thought about it. So good way to just keep the lateral thinking going there. Last question we got here, Dino, for the night. I'm a believer that coaches need to bring the energy and leadership to the game. What are your thoughts in and around that? Do you need to bring the energy, or should it be driven from within the group?
There's certainly times in games that I felt there's a lack of energy, and I've certainly pushed myself forward more with my own energy from the bench where you've had that. Again, motivational speaks before the game, not so much, quicker hit something that's happened through the week that might just give them a little bit of extra juice to go out there, but not massive on that one. Just keep it tactical and the things that they need to do well to go and win this game. But, me and Justin are coffee guys. We drink one before practice every day. We drink one before the game. We get our little energies to a point where we're enthusiastic and showing a passion about how we do our job.
Yeah, I've always tried to think about this myself, and then when I'm coaching coaches talk about this, you need to be gauging how your group is. So if your group's really anxious and up, heightened and hyped up, I don't think me being the same is going to help us on that night. I think that's when I've got to be a little bit more reserved and collected in how we approach things. Whereas if it's a game where I'm sensing that they're not quite with it, or there's a false sense of where we're at and it's a little bit flat, absolutely, that's when I think my energy levels need to lift and be a little bit heightened to make sure that we are hitting the ground running in the game. We'll wrap it up there for this week's one. Again, want to thank our sponsors, Dreamstreet Lending, Tyre Power, SodaStream, Buller, Trojan Tools, Roll, TAC, Subaru, Harcourts, Moose Toys, Chemist Warehouse, Wiz, The Sporting Load, and Dermatech. Dino, anything to wrap up?
Yeah, no, I think for me, just having that, what's next mentality for my group. We're developing, we're teaching the fundamentals. What's the next aspect? And I think Phil Handy spoke on that one really well, on individual skills, putting that into your team skills as well. But then, yeah, just having that growth mindset that every loss is a learning experience, and keep driving that home about the lessons, to win. I think for individuals, if you're going to not play them, you get in your mind that you might not play them that night. Have that conversation before the game to say, hey, this might be a game that I don't see you getting a lot of minutes tonight. If you do, these are the things I need you to do. There's nothing worse than playing 15 minutes the night before and then having a 0 game, and that's a 0-minute game, and that's where it can be frustrating. So keep communicating with your players.
Beautiful. Well said, Dino. Stay safe, guys. We're back here Thursday with Ross McBains. We've got him coming on, talking about some at-home vitamins. So please tune in for that, and we'll catch you guys then.